last time. 3 deep breaths and then Om. This time as you breathe in and breathe out, pay attention to your face. Much of the stress in our body resides in our face, in our cheeks, in our eyes, the brows on our forehead. Wherever you notice a bit of stress, squeeze and release as you breathe in and breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Together, one last time. Take a gentle breath and then open your eyes. Put this side where the microphone comes in. Put the camera here. That is directly inside. Visible?
Yeah.
So I'll write and draw a few things as we discussed today. And so just to begin, my name is Chaitanya. So it's a bit of a tongue twister, but there's an easy way to remember it. Most of you know the Indian drink chai. You can think of Tanya taking chai. So that is Chaitanya. So it actually, the language Sanskrit, it means consciousness. So how we can refine our consciousness, how we can shape our life in a more meaningful way. That's what we'll try to discuss today. So I'll talk about this in 3 broad parts. Okay. Any problem?
Put it down.
Okay, that's fair enough. Okay. Yes. So the topic I'll discuss today is that how our mind, how it shapes our sense of self-worth, who I am and how I matter or don't matter, and from there how it shapes our happiness. So I'll do this in 3 broad parts. First I'll talk about my story, how I became involved in spirituality, and then I'll share some insights. So some insights from the tradition, the yoga tradition that I have learned from, and then I'll talk about some practical things that we can do. So we'll try to have a sip of wisdom today. So as you may noticed, when I came in, I need crutches for walking. So when I was 1, I was staying in India in a small town, and my mother took me dutifully to a nearby clinic to get the polio vaccine. And because it was a small town, the power supply there was often unreliable. The previous night the power supply had gone off, and neither the attendant nor the physician noticed that. But because the power supply had gone off, the fridge in which the vaccines had been kept had got heated, and because of that raised temperature, the germs in the vaccine had increased. When that vaccine was given to me, instead of preventing polio, it ended up causing polio. So now I don't remember any of it. And last 30 years I have been a monk, and I have been traveling across India first and then across the world for the last 10 years, trying to share spiritual wisdom. There are many times when I am called to talk to forums where people have some special needs, and after my talk, I talk with the individuals who attended the programs, and some of the stories are incredibly inspiring, how people overcome obstacles and still do something worthwhile or wonderful with their lives. At the same time, many other stories are tragic. I notice so many people who are fighting battles that were lost long ago. Somebody lost a limb in an accident, somebody lost an eye because the doctor messed up, whatever. Now those stories are tragic, but it happened 1 year ago, it happened 5 years ago, it happened 10 years ago, and still their mind is filled with resentfulness. Why did this happen to me? Now, and because of that resentfulness, they just can't move ahead in life. So what happens is, if we fight battles that are lost, we all have to fight. Life is not easy, but if we fight battles that are lost, then what happens essentially is that it is we who get lost. In fighting battles that are lost, we get lost, and this is the big problem of resentment. When we resent, this is what happens. Now, when I look back at my life, I don't really remember any time feeling resentful about my physical disability. And the great credit for that goes to my mother and the spiritual wisdom that she provided me in my childhood. Now, when I got the polio, I was just learning to walk and I fell down, and I could never walk thereafter normally. But my first memory of that is when I was about 2.5 or 3, and a distant relative had come to our home, and she was trying to console my mother, saying, "It's so sad your son got polio." And I remember my mother's voice, calm, clear, confident. She said, "Whatever he lacks physically, God will provide him intellectually." Now, I don't know why my mother said that, whether she had seen some intellectual ability in me, or whether it was her hope, it was her prayer, it was her blessing. Whatever it is, she somehow said that. And when I was in my early teens, she passed away. And somehow that incident it stayed at the back of my mind. It shaped me, but I did not remember that incident till recently. So now that statement stayed with me. Not the God part, that came later, the intellectually part primarily. So as I was growing up, I couldn't play any outdoor games like other kids could play. But when I started reading and studying, I noticed that I could read quite rapidly, I could grasp things quickly, I could remember things well, I could articulate also fairly clearly, and I was doing reasonably well in my studies. Now in my neighborhood there were kids, and some of those kids would make fun of me. There was one boy in our neighborhood who was excellent at athletics, and because I couldn't even move practically, he would make a lot of fun of me. He would tease me as a cripple, and this teasing annoyed me more than hurt me. I would have felt far more hurt if somebody had called me stupid, because I identified more with my head than with my body, but still it did annoy me. Then one day my mother told me that this boy's mother had come to her with a request. He said that he was struggling in maths, and I was quite good at maths, so she wanted that I should help him in maths. And even before my mother completed her sentence, I said, "No, My head was vigorously, no, I am not going to help him. My mother persisted. She said, they are our neighbors and he is your friend. I shook my head even more vigorously. He is not my friend. But my mother insisted you should help. So I relented. And then when I was trying to help him with maths, after some time I just noticed he couldn't get even basic arithmetic. I was trying to explain, he just couldn't get it. Like he was well built, but it seemed there was nothing inside the head. Now, I am not saying this in a derogatory way, but it's just that he couldn't understand it. And when that happened, one part of me wanted to laugh at him, just the way he had laughed at me. But then something inside me said that, if he mocks you for your physical limitation, and you mock him for his intellectual limitation, then how are you any different from him? And somehow I didn't do that. And this understanding to articulate took a long time, but there is a part of me which could have asked this question, no, it's so unfair that I have this physical disability. What did I do to deserve this? That's a fair question. We all feel during our life, sometime or other, life is unfair. But then I could turn that question around and ask, what did I do to deserve this intellectual ability? So life is unfair, but in the big picture, life is fairly unfair. Fairly unfair means that in some ways we get worse than what we deserve, and in some ways we get better than what we deserve. So now I am not saying that for some people life may be far, far more difficult than others. Say we are living in Australia, I am living in Australia, I am living in India. Of course, some of you may be from different countries, but there are parts of the world which are war torn right now, and life, objectively speaking, may be much more difficult over there. Still, this fact remains that there is a part of our life which is unfair, where things are worse than what we deserve, or things are worse than others, but there is a part of life where things are better than others, better than what we deserve. And over the years, what I have realized is, this is going to be the most defining choice of our life. What are we going to focus on? Are we going to focus on whether life is unfair to us? If we do that, that is a dark downward trajectory. That will make us resentful in life. On the other hand, if we focus on how life is fair to us, that can take us on a positive track. That can help us to become resourceful. Resourceful is, okay, whatever resources I have, how can I use them fully? So my mother also taught me the Bhagavad Gita, which is a yoga text from India. She encouraged me to memorize some verses, but it was many years later when I was studying engineering that at that time I actually saw the Bhagavad Gita as a book of wisdom and dove deep into it. So that's the second part. So that was my story part. I'll talk about, in the sip of wisdom, the insight. So what I sensed at that time, maybe intuitively or at the back of my mind, I could place it in a broader worldview when I studied the Bhagavad Gita. So among the many teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, one of the teachings that I found most helpful was its portrayal of the inner world. So that, let me explain what that portrayal is and how that shapes us. So at this point now, do we choose to focus on how life is unfair to us, or do we choose to focus on how life is fair to us? That choice, as I said, is going to be extremely important. But is that choice entirely in our hands? Now some of us may be tall, some of us may be short, Some of us may be born in wealthy families, some of us may be born not so wealthy families. Some of us may have talents which are very easily noticeable, some outstanding talent we have. Some of us may find that, okay, I don't have any special or specific talent. So we are all different in various ways. And so this capacity to focus on the positives rather than negatives, what determines that? That's what I'll try to focus on now, the second part, where I'll talk about the inner world, so the topic was how our mind shapes our self-worth. So, and then how it shapes our happiness. So the Gita explains that our inner world is 3 level. There is the body, the mind and the soul, and these 3 together are basically the self. So we have the body, the mind and the soul. Now all these 3 together comprise the self. So this could be broadly compared to a computer system. In a computer system, we have the hardware, which is like the body, we have the software, which is like the mind, and we have the user, that is the soul. So body, mind and soul is a 3-level conception of the self. Now within this 3-level conception, the mind plays a critical role. Let us try to get a better understanding of this. Now from the soul comes out consciousness. Is this yellow color visible? Yeah. Okay. So consciousness is, like I talked about Chaitanya, this is consciousness. So now let me explain this idea of consciousness. Can you see this flashlight now? So there is a source of light, and from that source a beam of light is coming out. So the source of light is the soul, and the beam of light coming out from it is consciousness. So now, is the source of light there? Yes. It is there, but can you see it? No. So our mind can be like this. This is, say, a person who is open-minded. So the consciousness can go out and come in. This is a person who is close-minded. So nothing goes in and very little comes out. That person just stays stuck in their conceptions. So the mind is the intermediate between the soul and the body. The mind is subtle, just like the software is subtle. Now sometimes the mind is confused with the brain, but the brain, however, is a part of the physical body. So those of you familiar with computers, say there is a central processing system unit, CPU, that is a part of the physical hardware, or we simply call it the processor. Now we have faster chips, the phone becomes faster that we may be using. That is a physical chip, but the software, we may have iOS, we may have Android, that is a subtle thing. So that is like the software. So now let us try to understand the mind a little bit more. So I will talk about the mind at 4 principles. I talk about it, fairly simple. See, the mind is the route of consciousness. Route means is the link, the pathway. The mind is the route of consciousness, whereas the soul is the root of consciousness. The consciousness comes from the soul, it goes through the mind. So sometimes when we are distracted, we use the word we are absent-minded. So essentially what happens when we are absent-minded? The soul is here, the body is here, but the mind is somewhere here. Then what happens? Maybe a small part of the consciousness is here, and the major part has gone off with the mind. Sometimes if we hear a long talk, then our mind goes for a long walk. And then if there's some humor, the mind comes running back, hey, what was the joke? I also want to laugh. So the mind is the route, but sometimes the mind gets distracted and then the consciousness does not flow through. That's how we become absent-minded. So the mind is like the route. However, it's not just the route for consciousness. It's not by the way, in Australia, you pronounce it route or route?
Route.
Route, okay. Route for consciousness, okay. Rout means to defeat somebody, yeah? Like one army was routed by the other army, okay. So, route for consciousness. So now the mind is not just that. The mind is something more. The mind is also like a screen. Sorry. It's like a screen. As a screen, it takes in inputs from various places and brings them together. It's like the screen. When we use the word screen, it is on the mind, the various inputs are coming together. So right now, you are looking at me, you are looking at the projection, you are also hearing what I am speaking. So inputs from the eyes, input from the ears, they are coming together on the mind. So when we say the mind is like a screen, if I put it over here, on this screen there are many windows. And all these windows are there. So right now when you are hearing me, there is also a bird chirping over there. That bird chirping sound is also there. Now that's a pleasant sound in the background. Some of us may be hearing that. It calms us. If suddenly there is a fire alarm, that's also a sound. That window opens up. Okay, I have to get out of here quickly. So there are many windows open on the screen. So the mind acts like a screen, where the various inputs are brought and presented for us. Along with that, the mind is also like a memory device. Memory device means that in the mind, it's not just, so these are all, when I talk of the mind as a screen, there are inputs coming from outside and they are coming as pop-up windows. If you consider us, if we have some security room for a big important building, then they may have, you might have seen this big monitor they have, and then they have CCTV cameras at all the doors, and from all the doors the windows come in and then they are opened as screen. Have you seen this kind of camera in big buildings? The multiple windows are there. So the mind is like that, multiple windows are open on the mind. But it's not just that. The mind is also a memory device, and memory device means what? That inside the mind there are impressions. So now if somebody has come here for the first time and say, suppose the fire alarm signal in Australia is say different from the fire alarm signal in siren in Europe. Now if there is sudden sound in the background, if you know that it is a fire alarm, then your response to that sound will be different from somebody who does not know it is a fire alarm, isn't it? So basically it is a memory, and so when something pops up in our mind, and that brings me to the last part, I will explain this. The mind is an integrator. Integrator means that it does not just passively display inputs that are coming over there. Let me explain this, and this will help us understand how we function. So if we consider, the mind has impressions over here which are already stored, and then from outside there are perceptions that are coming in. So there are many different perceptions may come up. Now when these perceptions come up, the perceptions, they interact with the impressions. Say for example, I am from India. If right now I start speaking in an Indian language and you do not know the Indian language, then you will just look at me with a blank face. The perceptions are coming in, but there are no impressions inside that will help you to make sense of those things. So, there are perceptions and impressions. So, based on these, certain pop-ups come in the mind. Just like in our phone, pop-ups come up. So, we could say certain things pop up in our mind. So, now there are many different things which are popping up, and these pop-ups are a combination of perceptions plus impressions. So, the mind integrates these two things. So, for example, let us consider somebody has had trauma. Now, trauma can range from somebody saw a bomb, somebody was in a war area and they saw a bomb exploding and they saw somebody close to them just blown to smithereens. Now, after that, if they hear any object falling, they might just become paralyzed, catatonic, they just become overwhelmed completely. Or say somebody was bitten by a dog in their childhood. Now, if they see a dog, even if it is a small, gentle, cuddly little poodle, seeing that dog, they will start trembling. So, depending on the impressions that are there inside us, the perceptions that come in, they can become enlarged, maximized, or they can become minimized. Just like in our phone, there are many notifications that come up. Some notifications might just come as a small pop-up on the top of the screen. Some notifications may just occupy the full screen. So, like that, there are many things that pop up inside us. So, these impressions in Sanskrit are called as samskar. Have any of you heard this word samskar? Okay, some of you have heard it. Now, this word samskar can also be written in English as samskar. So, everyone has some or the other scar in their psyche. And what happens because of this? How do we know what impressions we have, what samskars we have? As I said, normally how the mind functions is, there is a small, if there is a stimulus, there is a normal proportionate response. We could, let us use the word reaction right now. So, if somebody calls us, calls our name, we may turn our head, who is calling me? There is stimulus and there is a reaction. So, this is, we could say, the way a healthy mind will function. Somebody yells out our name, we immediately turn around, okay, what is the matter? Is this person angry with me? Is this person in trouble? Is there some emergency? So, the strength of the stimulus will determine the strength of the response. But our minds are often not healthy. I will explain what that means. Once I was giving a talk and the organizer was behind me and the organizer wanted to convey something to me urgently. So, the organizer tapped me on my shoulder and they tapped me and I almost screamed, ah! He just was taken aback. What happened? I said, actually I had fallen on my shoulder and I have a sprain over it. Oh, I didn't know that. He said, I am sorry. So, generally if there is any wound, if there is any injury, then what happens? Small stimulus and huge reaction. So, this applies to physical wounds and it applies also to mental impressions. This is also an indication, a symptom of a samskara. So, samskara means that inside us there are impressions and depending on what kind of impressions are there inside us, sometimes a small stimuli may lead to a huge reaction. Or sometimes we are speaking something and if we see the other person is very disturbed, we might ask, did I touch a nerve there? Have you heard this phrase, did I touch a nerve? So, now we are using biological language. If suppose the hair is being cut or some surgery is being done or even some dental filling or before we do a root canal is being done, when they touch a nerve, we feel a lot of pain. So, like that, touch a nerve refers to when any of our samskaras are triggered, then we react a lot. Now, small impression leads to a severe reaction and this can affect us in many different ways in different times. For somebody, that the samskaras are associated with broadly two things. They are associated with our emotions and they can be associated with our desires. Now, when they are associated with our emotions, that leads to traumas. So, if somebody was mugged, somebody was assaulted by a heavily built person. Now, if they see anybody who is heavily built and if they find that I am alone, they immediately start becoming scared. So, what is happening? Now, that person may not actually be threatening at all, but that small perception, see when a pop-up comes, the pop-up is not coming only because of the perception. Perception plus recollection from inside. Perception plus the impression from inside, both of them together lead to the reaction. So, now we all have emotional wounds because of which we may overreact at times, and this can sometimes lead us to moodiness. Sometimes we get very disheartened by some things. So, for example, a life always has ups and downs, that is just natural. But sometimes some people you may have seen, when the ups are there they go way up, when the downs are there they may go down, way down. So, what happens for them? They are emotionally not stable. When something goes right, they have so much energy, they feel as if I can shake the whole world. When something bad happens and the whole world can't shake them out of their bed, they say, I want to be here. So, this is in psychology sometimes this is called as the manic depressive personality. Sometimes they have just manic levels of energy in some phases and then they are very depressive. Now, there are some other people, they just keep going down and down and down only. When something bad happens, they feel down. When something good happens, they start getting scared. Now, something good has happened, now something bad is going to happen after this. And instead of appreciating the good, they become more fearful. This is more what we can call as a chronic depressive personality. So, in the language of the Bhagavad Gita, this is the mode of passion which is called as rajas. This is the mode of ignorance called as tamas. Now, the point is, people who are behaving like this, and say this person is emotionally depressed, or this is emotionally unstable, or this person is a very depressing person. Like there are two kinds of people in the world. There are some people who bring happiness wherever they go, and some people bring happiness whenever they go. When they come to a particular place, they seem to suck all the oxygen out of that place. They are so dark and overbearing and foreboding that when they go, it's a relief. So, now what is happening? They are not bad people, but their mind is like that. Their mind is filled with certain samskaras. So, it can happen with respect to wounds. When emotional wounds are there, that leads to trauma. Now, when the samskaras are associated with desires, that leads to cravings and eventually it leads to addictions. So, small stimulus, huge desire. That desire just takes over the person. I have a friend in America who is a recovered alcoholic. He was a very high performing individual, but his alcoholism was a big issue for him. And for many people, when they have some addictive issue, they often are in denial of it. It's not a big problem. It's called the no problem problem. And I have no problem. Like Oscar Wilde phrased it nicely. He said that giving up smoking is the easiest thing in the world. I have done it over 100 times. I gave it up, but it didn't give me up. So, now what happens when there is some addiction? So, this person was telling me when he realized how his alcoholism was an issue. So, he was very rapidly, he was working in a Fortune 500 company, he was rising rapidly in his career, he was very talented, and he was invited to an international corporate retreat where all the top leaders of his company were coming. And when he went, it was a 7-star hotel, and he was going toward the boardroom for a meeting, and he was glancing around, and he saw some alcoholic beverages. He just glanced at them for a few seconds, and then he went ahead. And when he reached the venue of the meeting, he met his boss, and he was talking with his boss, and he told me, suddenly in my mind, my boss' body changed into a bottle of alcohol. And I just couldn't think of anything, I couldn't see anything, I couldn't focus on anything. And that's when I realized I am in trouble over here. I am in trouble. So what happens for us? We all have our mind, and our mind has certain impressions. And because of that, certain emotions may trigger us, certain desires may trigger us. I talked about emotions and desires. Now, I was earlier talking about self-worth. So I was very fortunate that my mother, she helped me to shift my focus to my intellectual side. Now, we are all shaped by the kind of statements that we heard in our childhood, and we are also shaped by the kind of statements we hear as we go through life. So our self-worth is often shaped by which statements we heard and which statements got impressed, got embedded in our mind, and now they pop up. So whenever we try to do something in life, maybe there's a voice that says you will never amount to much, you won't succeed, and even if you do it, this is not what you're really meant to do, you should be doing something else in life, you are a loser. So our self-worth is shaped not just by what abilities we have, it is shaped not just by what achievements we have, but it's shaped by what kind of impressions are there in our mind. So all of us, if we consider this to be our mind. Now with respect to the impressions about ourselves, so there could be positive impressions and there could be negative impressions. That means maybe we have achieved something, somebody has encouraged us, and that helps us to feel confident, that helps us to feel positive about ourselves. And maybe somebody criticized us. Nobody can go through life without facing criticism. We all are targeted. So those may also be things that we remember. Now both those voices are there inside us, stored as impressions. Now it depends, to a large extent our life's trajectory will depend on which of these pops up, which of these becomes prominent. Say if the upper voice becomes prominent and the lower voice becomes small, then we will be positive, we will be confident, we will be purposeful, we will be able to move ahead in life. But if this lower voice becomes prominent, then what will happen is we will become much more negative, which will become much more insecure, we will become much more vulnerable, provocable, irritable. So for us, this is going back to the earlier point I made, that about life is fairly unfair. This is where I am linking it now, that it is for us to choose. If we focus on this side, focus on what is right in our life, the impressions that are healthy inside us will become resourceful, and the impressions that are unhealthy inside us, that will make us resentful. So when I said it is the choice that is up to us to make, what that means is it is for us to choose which of the impressions inside us we will allow them to get magnified and which we will minimize. So as I said, for me the intellectual side was what was maximized. Now physically I have my challenges, but for me in my head space, in my mental space, the fact that I need crutches for walking, that is just like my glasses. I can't see without my glasses, but it's no big deal. Okay, when I wake up, I put on my glasses, when I pick up my crutches and go about my life. So it does not occupy too much space, it does not define me. But we are all having aspects of us which are limiting. There are sides of us which are disempowering, sides of us which are empowering. Which ones do we focus on? So I'll conclude now with the last part. I said this was the insight of how our mind works. Now we all probably know some people who are very talented, but they are very insecure. They have the talent, but the negative voices inside their head are very strong. Now we ourselves may be such a person. On the other hand, we all probably have observed people who may not be very talented, but they have actually done well in life. And that's possibly because whatever talents they have, they may not be full of resources, but they are resourceful. They use fully whatever resources they have. So how do we go about doing this? That is the last part I will talk. This is about in the SIP acronym, the practicals. So what can we do to ensure that we make healthy choices, we shape our self-worth positively? That is, that we focus on what is fair in our life, not what is unfair. We focus on the voices inside us, or the impressions inside us which lead to voices that are affirming rather than devaluing us. So broadly, this involves two main factors. The Bhagavad Gita talks about this in 6.35. It talks about this in terms of bonds and boundaries. Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha gruhyate. Bonds and boundaries. So what do I mean by this bonds and boundaries in this context? That there are things which are our strengths. Now whatever are our strengths, we need to bond with them so that they can be maximized, they can be utilized, they can be developed. And then we all have weaknesses. With respect to the weaknesses, we need boundaries. Now what does it mean? That in one sense, if somebody has weaknesses, we need to avoid getting caught because of those weaknesses or caught by those weaknesses. So let us start with a physical example, then I will go to a mental example. Say if somebody has a fracture, maybe they are injured, they had an accident or something and they got a fracture. Now if they are fractured, the first thing they will have to do is that they have to put a sling, maybe they have to have a cast. That is like a boundary. The boundary by which they do not move their hand unnecessarily. They do not move their hand in such a way that their injury will increase. So the boundary prevents further aggravation. Now after that is done, that is not enough. Then even after some time, the doctor will say, okay, now you have to start doing some exercises. Now maybe that person was pumping iron before, they used to lift huge weights and do lots of exercises. Now the doctor may say, okay, your exercises, okay, just move your forehand back and ahead 5 times morning, 5 times afternoon, 5 times evening. I say, what kind of exercise is that? This is not an exercise. No, this is the exercise for you right now. You do this and gradually you can start moving your full hand. After some time you can start lifting the light weights. Then you can lift heavier weights. So the bonds are for the healing. The boundaries are to prevent the aggravation. So similarly for us, if we have some traumas, we have some addictive desires. So to deal with those, the boundaries are so that our desires don't get triggered, so that our traumas don't get triggered. We need to create some boundaries. So for example, if somebody is an alcoholic and they want to recover from alcoholism and their home is right next to a bar. Now we all have moments of weakness. We have weak moments, and if their home is right next to a bar, then there will be no bar for them to go to the bar and they will relapse. So, a boundary could mean that if they are serious about recovering from alcoholism, they may need to relocate. They may need to empty their own fridge or wherever they had any alcohol. No, I am not going to keep this. They have to create some boundaries. So, each one of us, we need to find out what boundaries we need in our life for protecting ourselves. So, I will, if you forget everything from this session, just remember this one diagram. There are boundaries and there are bonds. So, boundaries are with regard to things that we do not want to do. Boundaries are for the unhealthy impressions inside us. And the bonds are for the healthy impressions inside us. For inside our mind, there are positives also. So, whatever our interests, our talents, abilities, we want for those healthy impressions, we need bonds. So, if we consider these as 4 quadrants, are the boundaries present? Yes. The boundaries are, instead of putting it clearly, the boundaries are present or the boundaries are absent. The bonds are present or the bonds are absent. So, based on this, we will have 4 quadrants starting from the right bottom. So, boundaries are present, bonds are absent, both are absent, bonds are present, but boundaries are absent and both are present. So, for example, if somebody is an alcoholic and they want to become free from alcoholism, or somebody has been traumatized by fear because they were attacked or whatever, at such a time they may need boundaries initially that do not go to places that will trigger you, do not go to places that will traumatize you again. But one cannot live in fear all the time. One cannot live throughout one's life avoiding alcohol if they want to recover from alcoholism. You also have to see, okay, what do I want to do with my life? What is it that is my gift? What is my talent? What is my blessing? And now, Bhakti Yoga, when we come to a spiritual place like this, we do kirtan, we sing the holy names. This is a way to create positive impressions inside us. This is a way to strengthen our impressions. But the bonds are to what are the things that I want to develop in my life. And if we, let us look at these 4 quadrants, each of them. Now, if we have neither boundaries nor bonds, then we are doomed. It's like somebody is an alcoholic, they have nothing else to do in their life, they have no bonds, they do not have family, they do not have friends, they do not have a job, they do not have any sense of purpose in their life. And maybe they have no boundaries in the sense that maybe they have inherited a lot of money, they can drink whenever they want. If they have no bonds and no boundaries, they are doomed. This is a deadliest situation to be in. Now, if we have boundaries but no bonds, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. So, many traditional cultures, the religious or non-religious, many traditional cultures had a lot of boundaries. But unfortunately, in these cultures, the philosophical dimension was lost and the bonds are therefore not provided properly. So, often people feel suffocated because of that. Because what is happening? Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. If somebody is an alcoholic and they are trying to recover from alcohol, they say, okay, I will not go to a bar, I will not go to parties where people are going to drink, I will not go to places where drinks are there. Okay, what are you going to do? Many times when we make New Year resolutions or anytime we make resolutions, one reason we fail is that we focus much more on what we will not do rather than on what we will do. Yes, what we will not do, that is important, but that is going to create a hole inside us. How is that hole going to be filled? So, no bonds and only boundaries will make us feel suffocated. Now, if we have bonds but no boundaries, somebody decides that, okay, somebody is alcoholic, they decide, okay, I am going to take up a job that I like, maybe I want to do some social service, I want to do some work which I like. But while doing that work, they are going to bars, they are going to parties where people drink, they do not have any boundaries. Then they will be endangered. And the last is, if we have bonds and boundaries. This is where we will be empowered. We will have the best possibility to become the best version of ourselves. So, all of you have chosen to come here to this Krishna village. This is an example of a place where there are bonds and boundaries. There are boundaries. There are certain kinds of foods we don't eat, certain kinds of activities we don't do over here. So, there are some boundaries over here. But it's not just don't do this, don't do this. You can live close to nature, you can work on the farm, you can bond with people who are spiritually minded, you can learn about life's higher dimensions. There's an opportunity to develop bonds also. So, bonds, I don't necessarily mean only relationships. Relationships are important, but bonds means that we bond with something that brings value to our life. So, it could be a talent, it could be an interest, it could be a relationship, it could be even a worldview that helps us bring value to our life. So, when we find this combination of bonds and boundaries, we will find that our life can be transformed, our mind can be healed, and whatever may be causing insecurity to us, okay, I have some disempowering parts, they are there. I don't have to worry so much about them. There are some negatives about my life, but there are some positives also. What are the positives? I will work on them, I will develop them, I will maximize them, and that way each one of us can do a lot of good for ourselves, for our families, our communities, and for the world at large. Now, how much good we can do? None of us knows that. We all have achieved some things in our life. We all have done some things. If we are alive, that means there's more right than wrong in our life. There are lots of people of our age whom we know we may have they may no longer be alive. So, if you're just alive, that means there's more right than wrong in our lives. But each one of us, we can achieve much more, we can do much more good. And how much more good we can do if we frame our life in terms of bonds and boundaries, how much good we can do, discovering that can be our life's greatest adventure. The Bhagavad Gita calls upon each one of us to embark on such an adventure. I'll summarize what I discussed today. Can you get the books, please? Especially the mind book you can get. What's your own? Okay. So, I'll summarize. I discussed today about how our mind shapes our self-worth and happiness. So, I talked about 3 broad points. Anyone remember the acronym? The sip of wisdom, yeah. So, S was the story. So, I talked about my own life and how my mother shaped my life, that although I had physical disability, life was unfair, but in the big picture life is fairly unfair. And the choice is for us whether we will go upwards by being resourceful or going downwards by being resentful. So, then I was the insight. So, based on the Bhagavad Gita, I learned about this world view of how the mind is the intermediate between the soul and the body, and the mind shapes our life, body. We have a 3-level conception of the self, and I discussed about the mind at 4 levels. The mind is first of all like the root of consciousness. It is what enables consciousness to go out and experience and express things. Then the mind is also like a screen that presents inputs coming in from the various places. The mind is also like a memory device where impressions are stored, and the mind is a integrator of both, integrator of perceptions and impressions. So, we talked about how in the memory there are samskaras. So, the samskaras are basically impressions inside the mind, and these impressions can be seen by a small perception, a huge reaction. This can happen in terms of emotions. We all have our wounds, or it can happen in terms of emotions is traumas, or it can be in terms of desires which lead to addictions. And for us, whenever any window pops up, anything fills our mind, Now, what determines that is that the external perception is coming in, but also it mixes with the internal impression. Both of these pop up together, or both of us together determine the pop up size. So, if somebody is an addict, a small sight of an alcoholic bottle can overwhelm them. Somebody is traumatized by something, sight of a dog then can reduce them to fear. So, what do we do? For us, the practicals is that inside our mind there are positive impressions based on the strengths that we have, and inside the mind there are negative impressions based on the weaknesses that we have. So, we want this to be maximized and we want these to be minimized. We do not want to be blind to them, because we want to be aware of them. So, we maximize these through bonds and we minimize our negative points through negative side through boundaries. And then I discussed this 4 quadrant, that we have boundaries and bonds, and based on that each one of us, from whichever quadrant we might be in, we try to situate ourselves in quadrant 4, which is where we will be empowered. So, we try to find out what are the healthy bonds we can have, and if we are in quadrant 1 with boundaries but no bonds, we will feel suffocated. If we have neither bonds nor boundaries, we are doomed. If we have bonds but no boundaries, we are endangered. Might be doing something good, but we will always be vulnerable. So, from wherever we are, we can take stock of our life and learn to position ourselves in a place where we are guided by bonds and boundaries, and that is how we all can do much more good than what we are doing. And how much more good we can do, discovering that can be our life's greatest adventure. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any quick questions or comments anyone has? Yes, please.
How can I try to reduce my samskaras?
The big book. How do you reduce the samskaras? Generally by replacing them. So, dealing with samskaras can be done in many ways, but the most important way is to replace them. So, what does it mean replace them? Somebody spoke very negatively to us about something, and then now if we have people around us who are more affirmative and we take their words more seriously, then there have been people who have encouraged us in the past, but we don't take their words so seriously. So, replacing is one way of doing it. Now, that is the most important way. The other is we release some samskaras. Now, when we release means what? Sometimes like somebody had been bitten by a dog. Now, sometimes that memory just goes into the background, fresh memories come up, and that memory just gets lost. We have all gone through many experiences, and many of those experiences do not trouble us now, because they are just distant experiences. But sometimes some memories, they are very strong, they keep coming. So, then maybe through prayer, through meditation, maybe through therapy, whatever it is, that we may have to, in a secure, safe place, re-enter that experience and not relive that experience and all the pain of it, but re-enter it more like an observer. Okay, this happened to me at that particular time, or this is what I did at that particular time, but that incident is over. It does not define me now. That this incident is not going to happen again. So, sometimes one advantage I found about this model, which makes it so robust, is that it differentiates between us and our mind. And so, it says that we are not our physical self, we are not our mental self also, we are something different. And what that means is, if the mind is different from us, then the impressions inside the mind are also something different from us. They are present and they stay on, not just because they have such a strong adhesive force, it is also because we hold on to them, we let them define us. So, okay, this thing happened to me, whatever the reason, now that issue is over. I let it go. Sometimes some visualization exercises can help, but I feel trying to replace the impressions is what we should try to do mostly. Because in trying to release those impressions, sometimes we relieve them, and they stick to us even more. So that releasing has to be done a little more carefully. Okay, thank you. Good question. Any other questions? Yes, please.
I was just wondering, my understanding of Bhagavad Gita is like a lot about equality and equanimity, where through joy, sorrow, victory and defeat, gain and loss, you're meant to be the same. But this seems as though this method with the mind, you know, you just go on with your activities for or advancement or for going upwards with disregarding those things. But this method with the mind, this seems as though we're actually really focusing on the positive and getting rid of the negative rather than ignoring both the positive and the negative.
Okay, that's a good point. So the Gita has multiple teachings in it. Now, one of the aspects when the Gita says that don't be elated by happiness or don't be dejected by distress, what it means is that don't let those trigger you. Don't say, for all of us, that, see, the world has taught us that certain things, see, there is happiness and there is the world's definition of happiness. We all probably lived and grew up in a culture where we were taught that this is what will make you happy. It might be, oh, you earn a lot of money, you know, you have nowadays a lot of social media followers, you become an influencer, you become popular, you know, whatever it is. Different people we all have different conceptions of happiness, and happiness is not necessarily equal to our conception of happiness. So when it says don't get too elated with happiness, don't become too dejected with distress, that was, you remember I was talking about these ups and downs of life and somebody going way up and way down. So it is what saying that don't go up too much, don't go down too much. And what I was talking about today is the process by which we will get to that place. That if the samskaras in our mind are changed, then we won't get triggered that much so much. Okay, now that when I understand, okay, these things, the externals come, they go, they are not that important. So we won't get so agitated by them, and that's how that result of equanimity will come. So when we have a higher spiritual purpose in our life, then naturally small things won't disturb us so much. Okay, thank you. So thank you very much for your thoughtful participation today. My best wishes and prayers that all of you can draw something from the wisdom of the Gita and gain strength to better manage your minds and become your best selves. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. So just a quick announcement. Much of what I spoke today is there in this book. It's called You Are Not Your Mind, You Are Better. So there are 64 articles in this book, and like I was drawing some simple conceptographics to explain the concepts. So each article is just 2 pages, very light read, and there are questions which are commonly associated with the mind. What exactly is the mind? Is the mind different from the soul? What is the difference between mind and consciousness? Why does the mind remember negative things more than positive? Now, is the mind actually our enemy, or is it sometimes acting like our enemy? You know, why is the mind so distractible? And how much can spirituality help us improve our mental health? Can spirituality replace therapy, or both can work together? So questions like this, common questions that are there, so 64 questions about the mind are answered in this book, You Are Not Your Mind. And now this is a daily study book. This is a Bhagavad Gita for daily mindfulness. There are 365 articles in it. Each article is just 1 page with a spiritual affirmation as a title, and then there is the verse on which it is based on the Gita, and then the 3 reflection questions. There are articles on topics of how to be more mindful, how to resist temptations, how to create more positivity within us, how to connect with divinity, how to be less judgmental with others, how to be more sensitive in our speech. There are about 10 topics like that, and there are 30, 50 articles on each of those topics. So, there are 365 articles. There are a few other books, but these two books are very much related with the topic that we discussed today. So, I will be here for some time. If any of you would like to have a copy of the book, you can buy it from him, and if you have any further questions, I will also be there to answer the questions. If you would like to have the book signed also, you can have the book signed. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.